4 guys crammed in the couch together.
You know what that means?
Man, why didn't we do this when The Fault in Our Stars came out? Man, that's a lost opportunity. Instead, we saw the most romance flick of the month, the new Hobbit movie, and the last Hobbit movie, the Battle of 5 Armies, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even keeping track anymore of the names.
Yeah, Battle of 5 Armies.
The Battle of 5 Armies, the conclusion to the trilogy, and I guess to the entire Jackson Tolkien series, I'm guessing.
Really?
Well, do you think... let's bring that up. Do you think he'll make any more?
I don't know, maybe they just forgot about the Lord of the Rings movie, and now they got to make 3 movies for each of those books.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. They didn't forget. They let us know every 5 seconds by referencing other people from Lord of the Rings. There's a ranger you might know. His name is Strider, but his real name? You'll have to figure that out later.
Okay. to be fair to the movie, in the appendices that actually did happen.
To be fair,
the way they did it in the movie was really silly.
To be fair, the movie, it was cheap exposition.
It was.
I like it better how they did Christopher Lee's.
Keep talking.
When they were just said, "Oh no, I'll go watch over this," and then they don't actually explain that he does become evil. But we all know he becomes
Now that you
evil.
brought up Christopher Lee and Hugo Weaving have a cameo in this film.
It was awesome.
Now Hugo
They had
Weaving.
cameos in the other ones.
Hugo Weaving was great. It was kind of awkward when Christopher Lee... I love Christopher Lee. It was kind of awkward when he came in because you see his face and then you see a stuntman for the rest of the scene.
Well, he's what, 92? 93. He's 93 years old. Cut him some slack.
It's not that I'm not cutting him slack. I'm not cutting the film slack because it's distracting. Because you can tell it's like zoom in on his face and then whatever you do, don't let that stuntman's face be seen. Show the back of his head the whole action scene. I thought it was funny. I like Hugo Weaving in there though. That was cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's aged quite well.
So for me personally, I didn't review the first Hobbit.
Really?
Austin and I reviewed the second one last year. I like the Lord of the Rings trilogy a lot. They're great. Didn't really care that much for the first Hobbit film. And like a lot of people, I'm having a hard time grasping them taking this story and trying to make it an epic, trilogy like they did with Lord of the Rings. Because it just doesn't work as well.
Nope.
Now, Desolation of Smaug, I actually gave a very good review because I actually thought that was actually, on its own, in fact, I thought that was actually a really strong film. I actually liked it a lot. And one of the things I liked was I like fantasy films that can really explore the world that they created, and that film did that. They travel a lot, and you see all these unique sets.
So you just like going to New Zealand.
Oh yeah. But I liked the lake town. I liked the spider forest. You see a lot of cool stuff, and of course the volcano. But in this movie, it takes place entirely on Lake Town / the volcano. But
it's not a volcano. It's just a mountain.
It's just a mountain. It's the fortress in the mountain.
Sorry, the mountain. For me personally, and all y'all talk for a second, but for me personally, I really wanted to like this film. I kind of felt unsatisfied at the end. And it's there's a lot of reasons why, but the main reason is because it just came back to bite them. The fact that they tried to fit this into 3 epics, it just wasn't, they were able to even though I didn't like the first one that much, it's decent enough to sit through. It's not 3 hours good, but it's decent enough to sit through. The second film I thought was actually a really solid epic. Mm-hmm. This one the whole film is just the climax.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just the climax, and you could say, well, it's the third in a trilogy. Of course, it's mostly going to be a climax. But here's the thing: if you're going to split your trilogy into 3 epics, or even still just a trilogy in general, each installment in that trilogy needs to have a beginning, middle, and end of its own. You have to, and because of that, it doesn't work because the beginning of this movie is essentially the ending to Desolation of Smaug.
Well, they did the same thing with the 2 towers. It started the same
I disagree.
way.
No, I disagree because the 2 Towers has a full ending.
Well, yeah.
The Two Towers ends with them winning
Yeah.
that battle,
Yeah.
whereas
I'm saying at the beginning, it starts the same.
Sure, but see, that's where I disagree though, because this movie begins with them immediately within the opening act.
If you came into this movie and you saw this movie without seeing the other two, and knew nothing about the books, you would be so lost.
Oh yeah.
Like you would have no idea what's going on
This
because
movie-
they don't explain anything. And
When I
they
kinda
just
thought about
kind
it-
of go right back into the story.
Because real quick, like, you know, if Two Towers was like Desolation, then Two Towers would have ended before that battle would have ended.
Yeah.
You know, it would have ended on a cliffhanger because that's what Desolation did. And we talked about this. I actually liked, if I recall my review, I liked the cliffhanger to Desolation, but that's because me having not read the book, admittedly, I assumed that the Smaug plot line would have still been in there for maybe 30 minutes or so, and then they could go into the Battle of the Five Armies. But they literally, before they even put up the title, spoiler alert, they kill Smaug already. And that, to me, that's kind of a big FU to the climax to Desolation. Kind of like, you know, to compare it, it's kind of like Count Dooku, Christopher Lee.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Well done.
he's built up in Episode 2 as this unstoppable Sith Lord, and they kill him in the first 10 minutes of Episode 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, that's my. So first of all, that's kind of what the big problem with this film is. The structure is just so, for me, it was just so all over the place. It was so weak because the first act is literally just the ending to what Desolation should have been, and then the second and third act is just the climax, and it was just kind of hard to get invested because, like you said, as its own film, it's just so. It's just a climax, and because of that, there's not much. For me, at least, there wasn't much to grasp onto. There wasn't much to like be invested in, even having seen the first two. Now, if you were to watch this film, maybe back to back with, well, okay, the first two definitely, but if you were to watch this like immediately after watching Desolation of Smaug, it actually might fit okay. But as its own movie, I was kind of disappointed. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think?
I was really hoping it would be like Two Towers, actually, because it was built up like it's supposed to be this big battle, and I was thinking Helm's Deep, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yes and no. Sure.
By no means, I wouldn't say by any means it's a terrible film.
No.
And there's plenty of good action in it.
Yeah.
Almost the entire film is action. There were some really memorable action scenes.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah, I don't think anything's ever really... I would have to say Two Towers is probably my favorite one because it's the it's the grittiest and darkest, and there's slime and blood and guts. Ever since then, it's all been felt kind of tame.
Sure, I hear what you mean.
Return of the King was pretty brutal.
Well, yeah, it was
I
pretty
still
brutal.
like Return of the King a lot, but I agree that Two Towers is also my favorite.
But I mean, even just looking at the color schemes, all the Two Towers was the darkest movie. Everything was at night. Everything was
Yeah,
darker
yeah.
tinted.
Yeah.
But then ever since then, everything's been bright and felt
Well,
cheery.
that's because
and
in
bad.
Two Towers, it's Sauron is at the height of his power, and the world is descending in the darkness. And in the Return of the King, everything is going back to light.
Yeah.
And I'm actually okay with that because each film should have its own look, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To once again compare it to maybe something like the original Star Wars trilogy, when you think of, you know, the first Star Wars, you think a lot, you kind of picture sand maybe a lot.
Yeah.
When you think of Empire, you think of snow or the clouds, and then when you think of Return, you think of like, you know, the jungle. So like, you know, each film was kind of able to bring its own atmosphere to the table.
Mm.
So I think the Lord of the Rings trilogy did a good job of that. I think the first two Hobbit films, especially Desolation, did a good job of that.
Mm-hmm.
This one stays in the exact same place the whole time, and so for an epic film, because it's staying, because it takes place in like one day or 2 days.
It starts dark
Mm-hmm.
at the very beginning of the movie because it's left over from Desolation of Smaug. But then it's all bright the rest of the way.
Here's my problem
There's
too with
no
that.
nighttime. There's no nothing.
The movie opens with Smaug burning the town down,
Mm-hmm.
and they still put in like little comedic moments, which there's been a few other times in Lord of the Rings when they do that and they've done it well. But some of it, and for me, the opening scene, it just felt uncalled for. Like for me, it felt really misplaced.
What scene?
The opening.
Like I can't remember off the top of my head what it was, but there were a couple like lines and a couple like actions that are kind of like
Supposed
funny,
to be comedic.
like kind of goofy, like kind of in the dark situation to kind of lighten the mood. But I was like, this is not the time to lighten the mood. Like, this is the time to keep the mood intense. And we'll get to this in a minute, but that guy,
the character that we were supposed to hate the entire movie.
Yes.
Oh God, I hated that.
he had no reason to be in that film.
No,
He did nothing.
except be there to hate.
There was no payoff either. He doesn't die. He doesn't get arrested. He literally leaves with gold. There was no payoff for that character. The whole movie is showing us how horrible this guy is and how annoying he is. And he's clearly supposed to be funny, and he wasn't. And then
And the only relief we could have had was watching him die.
and we don't even get
we
that.
don't get that.
Luke Evans should have killed him the first time he approaches him in this movie.
Is that the guy's name who kind of looks like?
Orlando Bloom.
Yeah.
And by kinda, you mean he looks just like Orlando Bloom?
when I
But
saw
the
the
fact that he was
trailers-
already in the movie, you'd say like that's Orlando Bloom.
When I saw the trailers for the first Hobbit film, I was like, is Orlando Bloom playing two
No,
characters?
no. I might have brought this up in our review. When he gets introduced in Desolation, I might have asked you in the theater, like, is that also Orlando Bloom? I was like, I literally thought, is he playing dual roles in this movie?
And I was like, no, it's just a guy that looks exactly like him.
No, it's just Dracula.
I wanted to lean over to you that whole time, and I was like, if you make a Dracula joke, I'm gonna beat you.
Drink the blood, Dracula. Okay, so Austin, what do you think? What did you think of the film? I mean, you're the biggest Tolkien fan out of all of
How
us.
about that romance?
Okay. No. I'm not gonna talk.
We'll get to that later.
Uh,
I just want everyone to say what they think of the film.
okay. As a Tolkien fan, I feel like I enjoyed it a little bit more because I knew a lot of like the lore and stuff that they were talking about, like stuff that people who are not fans might miss.
Sure.
And I can feel like I understand why someone who's not so read up on the lore and stuff might not enjoy it as much as I did, but I thought it was solid.
Sure.
There was a lot of things in it that I didn't like at all.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that didn't work. But for the most part, I thought it was fun.
Where would you place all three Hobbit films as what you thought was the best one?
Desolation was definitely the best one.
Do you think the first one or the third one would be in second place?
This one would probably be in second place. I didn't really enjoy the first. I mean, I enjoyed the first one, but not that much.
Sure, sure. Well, that makes sense, though. I mean, that's kind of what was like for you and me when we went to review Sin City 2, because in high school, I loved reading the Sin City comics, and when the main story with Sin City 2 with Dave McKeelfor was like my favorite of those comics, I was a little biased going into it because it wasn't going to take much to, please me as long as they faithfully adapted it, which they did. So I kind of hear where you're coming from. That makes sense to still have a little bit of a soft spot, so to speak, for that. Mm-hmm. What did you think?
I think, like, overall, when you break it down into what the parts it is, like, you have the big final battle at the end between all the 5 armies, you have the character development kind of in the middle, and you have the Smaug battle. Individually, those are all really cool. They just kind of feel slapped together, and they don't really fit.
That's a
like,
great way to
I
put it.
love the Smaug battle at the front, but it was just so abrupt. It happened right away, and then it was over, and then you forget about it, and you're moving on to something completely different.
They don't even like show Smaug's body or anything
No.
after that.
He just falls, and that's it.
falls and dies, and then it's like, okay, enough with that. Let's go over here.
We got too much shit
It
to
really,
get through.
I mean, again, I think I said originally, I really liked the cliffhanger to Desolation, but if I knew that was going to be the follow-up, I would have just preferred for that opening scene to have been the ending to Desolation.
Wouldn't that have made it a 4-hour movie?
No, it would have made it like a 3-hour and 10-minute movie because it's only like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And not to mention, like, it would have made Luke Evans' character more complete for that movie alone.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, Luke Evans and Lee Pace were the best actors and characters in this movie.
Who's Lee Pace?
Lee Pace is
The lead elf.
The leader of the elf.
Okay.
I'm becoming more and more of a
Leader
fan
of
of
the
that
elf.
guy the more I look into his
I
work.
still don't like him.
No, not
I
as
don't
a
like
character,
the elf.
as an actor.
I'm
As
sorry,
an actor,
yeah. He was the villain in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't notice that.
He's also in the TV show *Halt and Catch Fire*, which I love. So I'm actually starting to really like that dude. Some of the acting is kind of off in this. I couldn't tell if it was some bad lines, because there are some bad script lines in this film.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell if it was just the dialogue, but there were some, even from some of the good actors, there were line reads where I was like, that was oddly said. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm nitpicking on that, but there were moments where I was like, I don't know, that was... And like you said, it kind of almost felt forced and rushed a little bit, like some of the exposition dialogue.
There was one line that Thorin read when he was in the throne room, and I don't remember who was talking to him, but the guy was talking to him and telling him what he has become, and he's like, you treat me like I'm Thorin Oakenshield, or something like that, and I was like, Oakenshield. That was really weird.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, the scene to follow that was so long and pointless, where he's like examining himself.
Yeah.
I get what they were doing, but here's the thing. By this point, Thorin had become such an unlikable jerk that I just didn't care by that point. I was like, okay, either he's going to change his heart back to how he should have been, or he's not. It didn't need that complex of a scene to follow. It was like, either he's going to realize he's been wrong, or he's going to continue to be a jerk. So that was a really pointless scene, in my opinion.
Speaking of scene, the scene I thought the whole Sauron scene, the whole fight thing with the kings, with the 9 mortals.
That was cool.
That was cool, and that actually left me wanting more than the rest of the movie.
That's what I was saying. I actually dug Hugo Weaving's cameo. I was like, honestly,
the whole thing was cool.
I kind of wanted to see more of that.
Yeah.
I wanted to see. I mean, like you said, they couldn't, but I would. If they could, I would have rather watched more of Christopher Lee's character and what happens. What ultimately we know happens.
Well,
because it was just more interesting.
That's his next movie, The In Between. It's
I
a
wonder
5-hour epic.
How it's going to be a trilogy.
They would have to do it like Ed Wood style, when Ed Wood filmed what was that movie called? His first movie. I can't remember what it was called, but he had Bela Lugosi in it, and Bela Lugosi by this time was old and he was kind of dying. And so what he did was he just filmed for like 20 minutes Bela Lugosi sitting in a chair and just reading all this dialogue and all this narrative. And then he just spliced it in with all the other footage. And like there would be scenes where you would see random like stock footage of like bison running or like people on streets, and they would have Bela Lugosi's footage like over that, like as if he's God. And he would say, I was like, that's what they'd have to do with Christopher Lee. Like, just sit in this chair in costume, don't put too much makeup on him, his skin might break, and he'll just say all these lines in his voice, and his awesome voice. That's all we need for him to do.
Yeah.
He is technically the oldest heavy metal musician of all time.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. But anyways, so yeah, I mean, is there anything... Okay, so we can talk real quick about the romance if you want. So we talked last time that there was this really forced romance between an elf and a hobbit.
Dwarf.
Sorry, I'm tired. Hobbit, almost 3-hour film. You'll forgive me for getting it right. Dwarf and an elf. That happened in Desolation, and it was not in the book, and they added it here, and they embraced it more in this one.
But like, it's not just that it's not in the book, it's the fact that it's a romance between two races
that hate each other.
That despise
It's Romeo and
each other.
Juliet, bro!
And they would never do that.
It's
When you have that, it's the whole thing of them bringing the races together. You don't get that
Well,
payoff. It's just these two.
Well, that's what happens with Aragorn and Liv Tyler. It's kind of like that. Only that romance actually worked.
Yeah.
No, but
and there wasn't a major height difference.
But elves and men have always, like in all the lore, have got together.
It just happened that Hugo Weaving didn't like Aragorn.
Yeah. Well, but as far as, and I'm not defending this romance, but that's the point. Though the point is that they're the opposite. Again, it's that Romeo and Juliet syndrome. That's what it's supposed to be.
It's stupid,
but it doesn't really go anywhere because, spoiler alert, the dwarf...
It's not a spoiler, he dies in the book.
The dwarf dies, and then
the book is 90 years old, okay?
And Orlando Bloom is like... sweet. Now that he's out of the way, maybe now I can finally swoop in. But then, we never find out what happens with them, so... I guess judging by Lord of the Rings, I guess it doesn't work out.
Yes.
So that's too bad.
And then he gets together with Gimli and everybody lived happily ever
That's
after.
right. Then he and Gimli move in together as buddies.
So an elf,
we start a
elf and a dwarf
sitcom.
relationship did work.
I would love exactly, dude. That's the thing. It's foreshadow. Legolas learns from that romance that it can work between a dwarf and an elf. See, you have egg on your face because now you realize that this has come full circle. Peter Jackson knew exactly what he was doing.
I'm not going to get in the middle here when
I
he
think
strangles
you owe Peter Jackson a big apology. Yes. You can kill
Yeah, that's
me,
my
but
line.
you know what? Sebastian years later will find someone just like me and say, you know what? It didn't work between Austin and Micah, but it might work between me and this person. It's just, see, this is something that you can take and you can apply it to real life, man.
Okay, going back to the subject at hand.
I want to dwell more into this. Can we talk about romance for a moment?
The sword's over there. Just
We didn't get to do The Fault in Our Stars together, so can we rent that and watch it together? Okay, so is there anything about this movie that we haven't covered that much? We really don't need to get into the plot. There's no need to. Is there anything that anybody wants to bring up? Anything that stuck out in their minds? Any good things, bad things?
Okay. Not to put too many spoilers in, but the way that the villain Azog, when they're doing the battle and he like throws him the rock and then knocks off and then he falls down.
Yeah.
I thought it would have been a lot cooler if they would have just ended it there and not have him pop back out of the ice. I thought that was stupid.
I'm gonna level with you. If that's how he would have died, I would have actually hated that.
Really?
what, a
And
realistic death?
Here's why. The whole trilogy, one of the few things I liked about this trilogy, because that rivalry was not in the book, was it?
It was in the appendices.
Okay. So for something that the movies...
But in the appendices in a way where he wasn't hunting them throughout the
Okay,
Hobbit.
but here's the thing.
Because Azog died in the books, like 20 years before the Hobbit even happens.
Okay, but that doesn't work for a movie, though.
No, I understand.
For the sake of a movie, I actually liked that there was this rivalry between him and Thorin, and it was happening throughout the whole... It was one of the few things in all three films that I thought worked, because every time the two like encounter each other, you can just feel like the tension in the air. Every time they like charge at each other in slow motion, I actually was really into it. So in the end, when they finally have this final battle on ice, if they just ended it with him just basically maneuvering him to sink into water and freeze.
That's how real battles are won.
Yes, because The Hobbit is such a realistic story.
Yeah, sure.
A fantasy story.
For once in a while, I'd like to see someone have a realistic death in a movie.
Then
Is that
you-
too much to ask
Then
for?
watch
You
Saving
were,
Private Ryan.
you were watching a lot of people get sliced with swords. That's pretty realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were watching... But the thing is that the difference between that is that those are orcs that we know nothing about. Those are red shirts. Like, this is the only orc with a personality. And if for him to die like that, I get what you're saying.
Well, I
but it would have been just so
also
weak, in my
him
opinion.
popping back out of the ice led to Thorin's death.
Exactly.
Which was what happens
Yes.
in the book. He
I
dies
know
in
it.
the book.
I know it happened because you told me.
Yeah, okay.
Douche.
and I liked that.
You liked spoiling it for me?
Yes.
The book's 9 years old, okay?
Shut up,
I'm
okay?
not a fucking spoiler.
I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you for Austin.
Anyways.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. For me, I actually am glad
What
that
was
he
the name
came
of the
back.
guy with the metal in his head and body?
What
Did he have a
That's,
name?
that's the guy, isn't it?
No. You
Evil
mean
Orc
Orog?
number 2?
Yes. I thought his
Yeah,
fight- I thought his fight
exactly.
scene was
Big
too long.
steroid orc number 2.
He was the only one with metal
Yeah.
in his fucking. I'm not even gonna touch
Alright,
that.
one thing I really, really did like is how they ended it. Like the way it like went back
Transition.
into the
Yeah.
first
It
the
came
first
full
movie,
circle.
where it was
Yeah.
like, you know,
I actually thought that was a good...
when Gandalf goes into Bag End in the first one, he like picks up the map.
Yeah.
And that's like how they ended it. And I
Yes,
really liked it.
I like that too, and I like how they used the same actor from the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Ian
They
Holm.
didn't. They didn't just use an old. Yeah, they just put the guy in makeup or something. And
Oh,
also,
that's cool.
I am glad they didn't just do like a pointless Elijah Wood cameo like they did in the first one, you know,
Yeah.
or anything like that. Yeah, I like that too. I kind of liked, at first, I thought like the whole him coming back and then auctioning all his stuff, like I was like, that's really pointless and doesn't go anywhere, but
That's really Shire and Hobbit.
I kind of liked it because because when he opens, you know, his door and walks in, there's just nothing in there.
Mm.
And I just kind of like that because it's kind of like saying, you know, he's finally back and he's back home, but there's just nothing for him here.
Well, and it's just
Except the ring.
That actually
Like-
is. That actually is too what happens in the. He gets back in
Yeah.
the book and they're auctioning.
Oh,
all the
really?
Stuff.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that is what happens in the
But
book.
It's just kind of a metaphor because he's
Yeah.
not that person anymore. So
Exactly,
He doesn't
yes.
need that stuff.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I also thought it was cool because it was just like after Return of the King when all the hobbits are coming back and they're like, oh, where have you been? On an adventure. Oh yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah, they all thought he was
Yeah,
dead.
And then after that,
Yeah.
they're all sitting in the tavern, and everyone else is like, you know, having fun and stuff, and they're all just kind of sitting at a table by themselves with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the same kind of feeling.
And they're kind of like, well, you know, we're kind of the only people who really know what happened
Yeah.
out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Okay, I thought the way that they like Bilbo said goodbye to the dwarves was kind of like lackluster.
That was
It
well,
totally
that was
was.
really
that was really
That was
so was
really
all the other
stupid.
goodbyes in that
Hold on,
film.
hold on. That was really akin to that actor. You notice an
Martin
actor's
Freeman.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's really akin to his personality because that
True,
personality shines
true.
through in a lot of his stuff he does.
True,
Are you
but
implying that
you
he
know
just
what I'm
plays
trying to
pretty
say.
much the same character for every role?
No.
You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. And,
I
like,
have
you know.
some. I have to work on the ums.
And also, like, I know we've complained. I've always complained about this for the other two films, but the CGI.
Especially in the gold-plated
there's-
room,
oh,
the
there's-
gold-floored room.
But like, I liked.
We're reaching Lucas.
I liked.
Levels.
I liked in the original trilogy how the orcs were practically done.
oh, dude, that
Because
was
It was
so
people in
cool.
suits
so
and
much
makeup.
better.
and
And in
everyone
this-
was
and there-
different.
in this film, it was like there was some stuff that was CGI that didn't even need to be CGI. Like when
The birds.
when Bard
when that
Bard
bird
the
flies
Bowman,
out?
when Bard the Bowman is riding up to first meet with Thorin when he's walled himself in, I swear in the long shots it's him CGI'd on a horse riding up. I swear that was CGI.
Well, I'm pretty sure the little path that they talked through too was digitalized too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and like I said, that bird that comes out was CGI. They couldn't get a freaking bird. How much does a bird?
It's like Star Wars Episode 3 CGI.
It's really excessive, and it's very noticeable.
It's very
and it's
distracting.
extremely distracting.
yeah.
Like it
And-
works. Okay, it works in the battle scenes because you know it makes the soldiers look really cool, and you know it makes
Sure,
the battle look cool.
I
But
guess,
in
yeah.
all the other times, it's really stupid.
I'm honestly off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of a scene that was that I feel was actually on a set. I mean, the Shire scenes look like they're on a set.
That's
Well, yeah,
because
they
that
just
place
have them
exists.
left over.
Yeah.
That place exists.
Yeah.
And I guess the throne that Thorne was on might have been a set, but there's
But
very-
not the background.
No,
no,
that
but
was
like
all
the
static chair.
I mean, at least the seat
Well,
was real.
okay. What's the place called where the Nine Kings were? The Nine Kings Ghost.
Well, the background was green
That
screen,
one-
but the
Yeah.
actual
The actual
yes.
place was there.
Yes.
Mhm.
yes.
Dumbledore.
Yeah.
So, I guess if I had to rate the trilogy individually, I'll rate each one individually, and then I'll just rate the trilogy as a whole. I would rate Journey Begins. I guess C. I'll be gracious. I'll give Journey Begins a C plus. Desolation. I think I gave it a B plus. I'll stick with that.
Yeah.
B plus. This one, honestly, there's a lot of good battle scenes, and there's a lot of beautiful shots, and there's a lot of good moments. But at the end, it as its own, I have to give it like a D plus because they're all pluses. But I mean, it's just I really can't say. I just didn't take much away from this. I just didn't.
Yeah.
Now, as a whole, the trilogy as a whole, despite being way too freaking long as a whole, I would give it maybe a C+. So I would say
how would you stack it? What would you give for a rating for the Lord of the Rings?
Much better. All of them much better than that. The trilogy as a whole, I would give probably an A, because as a trilogy, that trilogy just comes full circle, and each film feels like it has to be 3 hours, if not longer.
Yeah.
So it feels completely necessary
That's
to be
because in
as
that,
epic
in that
as possible.
each film is based off one book.
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
3 movies based off
Exactly.
one book.
That's why, so this trilogy I would give a C+ as a whole. It's worth checking out, especially if you're a fan of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But
And especially if you're a Lord of the Rings fan.
Yeah, you kind of have to watch it either way if you're a Lord of the Rings fan.
I think it might help to almost watch this trilogy first and then watch Lord of the Rings, because it'll just get better from there.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
But
That's a good point.
so
Well, if you're watching them chronologically, then that's how
what would you guys rate this film and the trilogy as a whole?
I'm gonna abstain from that because I just can't.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Would you at least say you would say as a fan it's worth checking out, though?
As a fan, it's worth checking out,
Especially of the book.
There's a lot of things that they did that will make you
Cringe.
roll your eyes and ugh. But then there's some things that they do that are really cool.
Sure.
I mean,
this film, I'd probably give a C, but I like the battle scenes. I'm easy.
Yeah.
The whole trilogy, probably C+.
I think it definitely the middle one was the strongest one. It just felt right. The first one, you could really feel them kind of drawing it out. It definitely felt stretched. Third one felt like all the kind of scraps they had to throw together in the last one. So overall, the story's pretty good. I'd give it C+, maybe B-. If they'd split it into 2 movies, they individually would have been great. But
I've said that before. I stand by it. It should have been 2 movies.
Mm-hmm.
It should have been a Kill Bill Volume 1, Volume 2 kind of thing.
And I know that we've already talked so much about this, but in my opinion, I think these films would have been better if they would have been more practical. Be done the original.
Yeah, dude, you will. Look who you're talking. You will never get that argument from me.
But you know what I'm trying to say.
I know, but you're right. I've always been a big believer in practical over CGI. But
throughout these entire movies, I was always like, these.
That's nice
so
computer
stupid.
effects.
I mean,
it's nice to know that somebody spent a lot of time on their computer.
It's not like they don't have the money to afford to do it.
Yeah, it's Peter Jackson.
It's Peter Jackson in another Tolkien series. It's not like he can't afford to get it. Jesus.
Well, that's our review of The Hobbit. So, if you... I hope you enjoyed hearing us repeat the same thing over and over again.
Oh, good.
Next up, Faults in Our Stars.
What else is there to say?
Yeah, there really isn't.
It's the same tired argument.
I don't know what...
Movie.
I think I am seeing a movie tomorrow. I'm not sure what.
Oh, really?
I'm gonna... Yeah, a buddy of mine from high school and I are gonna go. I'm gonna try to convince him, maybe, to go see Andy and review it with me.
Don't do that to somebody.
I don't know what else is out right now.
Getting awful reviews.
Oh God, you don't want to see Black Annie? You don't want to see Jamie Foxx sing?
I like Jamie Foxx.
I love Jamie Foxx.
I don't like the original Annies though, so
I don't really. As a musical, I've actually never cared for Annie. Oh well. But there's no Tyler Perry's movies out right now.
Oh,
what am I supposed to do?
Don't drag someone to a Tyler Perry movie just because you feel like a masochist. That's not okay to do to somebody.
Hey, my Jingle All the Way 2 review made a lot more views than it normally would.
Yeah, I saw that.
People want to see me watch these terrible movies and talk about how terrible they are.
And yet I had to watch it with you.
You are the one that got the movie, and it was your idea.
That's because you had suggested it.
Why did you listen
to it? And it
him?
enticed you. You were lured in. Alright, I'm done. Thanks for watching.